Hello everybody, James Detroit. Thanks for tuning in. I do appreciate the fact that there are 34 subscribers. There have been hundreds of people watch any given episode at one time or another. For the most part, 15 to 20 people, maybe sometimes 50 people would even care about what I have to say. I thank you for subscribing. I thank you for tuning in. And I do find it, well, hard to believe that anybody would actually take a little time to see what my perspective is on something. And I do try to look at things, current events, from a historical perspective in the search for the truth. And one of the things that I would share with you is, lost the internet for a couple of days, spent a lot of time working, got a chance to play some golf and just kind of unwind and be me. And then also a little bit overwhelmed as to what's going on in our society right now. Very disappointed. I think this is a lot of the people that I talk to, very disappointed as to seeing the things that are happening in our country, and not only disappointed in some of our fellow citizens, because some people aren't necessarily citizens that are acting inappropriately, but also very disappointed in many of our leaders and the lack of action, in fear, mostly I think in fear of being labeled as a racist or prejudiced in some way just because they speak the truth. So where do I go for the truth? Thomas Sowell. He celebrated his 90th birthday yesterday. Born, that was his 90th complete year of life. That is awesome. 90. So if I can do the math real quick, 1930 to 2020. 90 years. And to be able to be a great example of an American, in that he was born in very, very impoverished circumstances in rural North Carolina, was part of the migration north, went to, his family decided to settle in Harlem, and dropped out of a very prestigious academy at one point, but then joined the military and went to school. And he has become a great example of, if you look at him, America is one of the very few countries, and it's been the best example of that in the history of human existence. You do not know where Thomas Sowell started out. So you can rise through different economic class in America, and you can also fall. Walter Williams wrote a great piece about Thomas Sowell. He's another gentleman. Bob Woodson is another gentleman. Again, not being a black man in the United States, and when I'm challenged by academia to be pointing a finger at me and saying, you have no idea what it's like. Well, I'm not going to listen to the mainstream media, so I'm going to go and I'm going to find somebody that I can respect. Thomas Sowell, I started reading him in the Flint Journal. He was a syndicated columnist, and they printed him. And it's this #1 reason why I bought the Flint Journal. And it's the #1 reason, the only reason why I stopped buying the Flint Journal when they still had a paper, because they stopped printing Thomas Sowell. And it took place at a time during 2008 when Barack Obama was running for president. And Thomas Sowell was very outspoken about, this will not be good for our country. And he made so many great points. Now, there is a book that I need to get even the title to. I just happened to come across it today, but he had written it. And it breaks down how the trickle-down effect, and how a lot of people will say that when you lower taxes, as the President Trump has in the last 2 years lowered taxes, and how he gives common sense evidence about how if you raise taxes on the rich, you don't actually take in more revenue for the country. By lowering taxes, the trickle-down effect actually does take place through more people being employed, more opportunities, growth of business, which also leads to another point about the opportunity zones that President Trump had also signed. But back to the things that are going on, the unfortunate lack of action by our leaders and an unwillingness to say the truth. I did see that Coca-Cola, Hershey, Pepsi, Apple, Nike, all these companies that are, all of these major corporations are falling for it's a rouge. It's flim flam. It's not real. The Black Lives Matter being a way to generate revenue for the Democratic Party. They also fund Antifa, along with George Soros and some other things. But now we've actually convinced major corporations to write checks to these organizations that are simply the absolute fringe. Because if you are a Democratic, longtime Democratic voter, which in my family there's been a lot of people. I mean, both sides of my parents, their parents voted Democrat. I grew up in a Democratic household. It's just what we did. I've talked about it before here. I chanted for Jimmy Carter when I was in elementary school. But if you're a white male Christian and you're voting for the Democratic candidate, then you are, it's difficult to see how you make sense of this if you believe in the United States of America. And then you might say, well, I don't believe in the United States of America. And that's what the people out in the street are saying. It's not that they want to just change excessive police force or police brutality, or I think there was something like 15, maybe 20 unarmed people shot by police last year. I think there was 80 or 90 cops, maybe 100, that were killed in the line of duty. People killed by police officers overall, and the vast majority of them were found that they were defending their own life or the life of somebody else. It was a legitimate shooting. When I hear these people on television talk about black men being gunned down in the streets by police, it's haunting to me, because I guess, only to quote Jericho Green and Kevin's Corner, two gentlemen I find very, very interesting and very entertaining, but it's CBLM, certain Black Lives Matter, because the hundreds and then the thousands, and I'll just go with Chicago alone, of black people that get shot every week and every year, and the hundreds every year, 800 to 1,000, that get killed in Chicago. We have not seen this same effort, but a police officer does a very difficult job, and we do need to support them, not defund them. And again, here's the great thing about the United States of America. I get a chance to share my thoughts right now. Today, this is not a crime for me to share my thoughts. From 1966 to 1976, there was a cultural revolution, they called it, in China. Mao is credited with killing somewhere around 20 million of his own people. He's credited for killing totally about 60 million of his own people. It's estimated, no one's ever going to know exactly how many. But one of the things they used to do is they used to have this, you'd have to come in and you'd have to admit publicly that you had a challenge. Because they got rid of, what they want to do is they wanted to get rid of all the old things, all the old cultures, all the old views, all the history. And so you'd have the struggle, they called it. And you'd get in a group in the community around you, and you'd admit that you didn't believe in the Cultural Revolution, according to Mao. And again, I'm not giving you the specific breakdown. I'm giving you a general description of how this would happen. And it could even include physical beating until you admitted that you were wrong and that you wouldn't do the old things anymore. You wouldn't believe in Christianity if you were a new Christian, or you wouldn't believe in the old cultural ways that you may have been passed down through your Chinese ancestry into how you lived your life. Today was a new day, and you needed to come to terms with how you were going to be different and live in that communal society. And think about that in comparison to slowly at first, and all of a sudden you started seeing Antifa do some of these things in these city centers a few years ago, and people were like, well, yeah, that's just a fringe group, that's never going to happen. Now it's caught on in such a way. We burned so many of our cities. You say, well, yeah, but we were burning cities in the 60s. Well, there was a little bit of a different movement. But the Marxism basis for what Mao initiated, right on through to what we see today, it has never gone away completely. And because we have a lack of real leadership, an unwillingness to enforce law and order, this has gained some momentum. And this is going to get worse before it gets better. I talked about a revolution, a peaceful revolution to the voting process. The revolution has already taken place. It's not peaceful, and it's not the way I see it wanting to go. This is, again, my personal opinion. And that includes, you have the right to share your opinion as well. You have a right to not listen to this, not share. I hope you do. I hope you find it to be interesting. I hope you find it to be something that you'd want to like it and then share it with somebody else and encourage somebody else to be a subscriber. But think about this. When the Tea Party, taxed enough already, when the Tea Party was expressing concerns and wanted some changes and actually won some elections, when the Tea Party was then targeted by the IRS, do we think for 1 second that that idea has ever left? Do we think for 1 second that if this election, the executive branch, the Senate, and or the House goes to the majority, to the Democratic Party, do we think for 1 second that we will not have an even greater criminalization for conservative and traditional values and mindset? If you think I'm crazy, I think you really need to get into the history, just in the last 150 years even. This has been a continuous reoccurrence of, for the workers. Yeah, man, for the workers. We can do this. We can make it better. The United States of America and the conservative values of the Constitution, not the discriminatory things. And oh, by the way, let's talk about the Republican Party being created to eliminate slavery, and it did. If Abraham Lincoln's not elected president in the first election, you don't get a chance for Emancipation Proclamation. If Abraham Lincoln's not elected in the second election, you don't get a chance for that to stick. That's a leader. You could almost say, because of the direction we were heading with our intelligence branches being politically motivated with, as I just mentioned, the IRS being politically motivated, you start attacking ideas, freedom of speech from that direction. We could even say that that was a very similar election in 2016 and an equally important election in 2020. If Donald Trump's not reelected, it's going to get much worse for all of the people out there that think it's wrong to burn the American flag, to think that it's wrong to burn buildings, to think that it's wrong to loot, to think that it's wrong to have zero regard for people's personal property, to think that it's wrong to just ignore the law, do whatever you want. I encourage everybody, obviously, to think for themselves and to educate themselves. Stop watching the news, mainstream media. There's so much information out there that's actually really good information. And some of these guys are very entertaining, way more entertaining than me. I don't try to be funny. I try to, I guess my approach is try to get some information out there, and I'm still very, very new at this. Trying to figure out how to bring some of my views to stimulate somebody's critical thinking. And if you have a worldview that's contrary to mine, I would like to try to win you over to think I'm making some sense. So maybe I get a little bit more entertaining someday. Maybe we'll see. Maybe I'm just an old boring guy. I don't know. I do appreciate you. It is hard for me to believe that 34 people would even be a subscriber. So let's maybe grow that number. And I hope that I can continue to try to give you some ideas to think about. If you have not spent some time reading Thomas Sowell, please do. This man is an incredible writer, and he's an American treasure. He really is. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you're safe. I'm probably going to have to go off on this COVID thing again, maybe even tomorrow. Who knows? But I just wanted to give props out, get back into the game here a little bit, give props out to Thomas Sowell. I've never met him, but man, I'd buy a ticket. I'd buy a ticket and just to shake his hand. I feel like I'd have regret if I didn't. And so I might have to take a trip to do that. That's how much I respect the guy. I'm James Detroit. I appreciate you tuning in, and I'm out.